Hi, everybody. I'm going to introduce myself first, and then we're going to go to everybody, and everybody's going to get a quick bio of who they are, and then we'll start talking about Jack Kirby Monster Comics. My name is Mark Maddox. I am a Monster Magazine illustrator. I also do some book covers and things like that, a few comic books, but I grew up on Jack Kirby. I don't think I'd be an artist if it wasn't for Jack Kirby. So I owe him probably my life in terms of a career. Anyway, so next we've got Matt Webb. Please, Matt, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hi. Yeah, I've been a professional comic book colorist since the 80s, and I never got a chance to work on as much Kirby stuff as I wanted to. Very little, actually. But I've been, just coloring comic books, graphic novels, and newspaper strips for, gosh, how many years now? I forget. But yeah, that's what I do.
What did you name some of the companies you work for? I'm curious.
Oh, I started off with Kamiko way
Oh
back
yeah,
when.
sure.
And at the same time, I was doing bonus books over at DC Comics.
Cool.
Those are like these little 14-page inserts that fit into regular comics, like Detective or something like that. In fact, I think the third one I did was a Batman story. So at least I got to color Batman. That was fun.
That's nice. That is very cool. It doesn't get bigger
Yeah.
than that. Yeah.
Well, I
Cool.
did do Green Lantern too. I did a lot of Green Lantern work. So
Nice.
yeah.
Love Green Lantern. All
And
right,
then,
Ted Haycraft. Go ahead,
Ted.
Ted.
Well, I'm the old fart here, I guess. I've been a big comic book collector and reader since like 66 or 1966 or something like that.
Yeah.
But I've been writing, I guess my basic reason is I'm a movie reviewer. I've been writing movie reviews off and on for different publications. And right now I work at an NBC affiliate. I've been there for quite a while, and I do the movie reviews on air. And but comic books and movies basically are in tie of my passions. So Mark and we've spent a lot of hours talking about Kirby and different types of comic books over the years. So hopefully I'll bring something to the plate. Hopefully with this panel.
Cool. I'm going to go ahead and start with, and then we'll run it down. The experience of being a kid, seeing Jack Kirby comics, and then separating the differences in time frame. Like for me, it was almost all completely backwards. My mom bought me some Fantastic Fours, Claw Murderous, Master of Sound, Last Star, King of the Negative Zone. I mean, just an incredible period for the FF. And so that to me was Jack Kirby. Then I found out a few years later when they were doing reprints like Where Monsters Dwell and Tower of Shadows and all that kind of stuff, I started seeing the monster comics, which were earlier. And then the weird thing is when he went to DC, you saw what was his very newest stuff, Jimmy Olsen and things like that. But then they put a Golden Age story in there, and then I got some issues of Fantasy Masterpieces back from Marvel and saw his Golden Age stuff. So it was sort of like, oh, there's like 4 or 5 stages to Kirby. And there you go. I love it. Yeah, I've got yeah. And so for me, being a monster movie fan, I found out in the mid-60s, I was turned into this colossal monster movie fan. When I saw I believe it was my first Jack Kirby monster story, was from Tower of Shadows, and it was Titano. It was a giant crab.
Yeah.
And the cover had the monster in the comic looked
This
different
guy's up
from
front going,
yeah. Yeah. I mean,
that was great.
I think Johnny Quest stole that from him, but anyway, so but on the crab on the cover had like a dome-shaped head, and there was just a big claw. But in the comic itself, it looked a lot more like a crab.
Mhm.
And I loved that story. I loved it, and it was like, wow, I've got like a portable little monster movie with me right here. I can look at it whenever I want to,
Mhm.
and the dynamics and the power of it, and it was just a 1950s, radiation made me do it sort of monster movie comic. So that was my first one. What about you, Ted?
Okay, well, probably the first monster ones were the Fantasy Masterpieces. I didn't see the first two issues, which were just all the short stories, but I
Right.
started buying it with Captain America reprints, and so
Yeah.
I kind of encountered them there. But I really didn't, of the three of us, probably I might be I didn't really pay much attention. Yeah, that's the first one, I think. Number three.
Yeah, I got it.
Number 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where. So I did pick up Where Monsters Dwell, number one, and I remember picking up the Tower of Shadows. But of course, Tower of Shadows had some new stuff in it, so I was really more interested in the new stuff. I want to say this is going to be a little off the beaten path here, but when they did the two-part story of Jimmy Olsen with Dracula, the Frankenstein, and
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
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 to me was such a hoot and so much fun.
Yeah. That
And
was great.
I was much more enthralled by that than the short stories. Because I think by the time the short stories were being reprinted in Monsters Dwell, Creatures Roam, Creatures on the Loose, I was kind of past that, and I was like, oh, they're reprints. They got these weird names, great Kirby art, but I just didn't really. I was kind of like going off into other branches. So it took me a while till I got back to the monster stuff. Now I love the stuff. I look at it over and over. I don't know as if I actually read it as much as I just look at it.
Yeah.
The stories, are pretty much the Twilight Zone, O. Henry, kind of repetitive over and over again.
Yeah.
I do like it when the giant monsters, the Googogs, the Goons, the whatever you call
Goo Gam and
Ramu.
yeah.
yeah, there you go.
I
Cool.
love when the ones that talk and get all mad, because some of them don't talk, but it's
Yeah.
always a hoot to see them getting all mad at us humans and getting so frustrated with us.
Sure.
So that was kind of
You're right. There really was a sort of a Twilight Zone sort of simplicity. I mean, and some of the short stories were short. Some were like 6, 7 pages. You
Yeah.
had to cram in a whole movie idea into the 7 pages. Some of them could be large. Some of them would be a whole issue with 3 chapters. But you look at there would be like a kid and he was an outcast and because he read books and everybody else was playing baseball. So come on, Timmy, come on and play baseball. It's like, no, I want to read this, Alexander Dumas or something.
Yeah.
And they'd make
yeah.
fun of him, and then the spider monsters would attack the earth, and then he figured insecticide would do it because he was the only one that would figure it. And then he'd kill the monster. He killed the king spider, and then they just left. We got to get out of here. They always said,
Yeah.
we must flee. The Earthlings have a thing to say. We must
Oh,
flee.
you want to do dialogue?
Yeah, really. What, so, Matt, what about you? I'm trying to figure. I hate to do this. Okay, Ted, you said you're older. Matt, how old are you again?
60?
Okay,
well,
so
I
and
guess we're close to age. I guess
and I'm
Yeah.
58, fixing to be 59. So we're not that
61,
far
I'm
apart.
61, so Matt and I are real close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess-
Well, I mean, Neil Young wrote the song "Old Man" for you, Ted. So. No, but yeah, so we're kind of close. The thing is that you started collecting comics. I saw my first comics of that type around '66.
Right.
But anyway, Matt, on to you. So as
Yeah.
I was saying, how did you tell us your first experience with this stuff?
Well, I first became aware of Jack Kirby as an entity, if you will. I was reading an old reprint of the Challengers of the Unknown. Okay.
From
And
around
there's
70?
a great scene where this guy, it's got the Ultivac one,
Yeah,
with the giant blue robot.
yeah.
And this guy's climbing up the cliff. And I looked at his fingers and I went, wow, that's different, but they look good.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like Kirby's fingers, but
No, I do.
his
I
hands
think
are not,
it's almost like a gateway drug to actual anatomy.
yeah.
Like, in other words, Gil Kane said one time, Kirby didn't really do anatomy very well, but it just didn't matter.
Yeah.
He was explaining something to us. So, yeah,
He-
but go ahead.
Just the action and stuff. So
Oh, yeah.
I took notice of that story. And then I got lucky. A friend of mine who had a magnificent comic book collection gave them to me. And in that collection was starting around Fantastic Four 34, and it went all the way up
Ooh,
until like till he left.
yeah.
Sporadically, I have bits and pieces of it. I don't have like the Galactus trilogy, wasn't there, or anything like that. But so I just started reading Kirby comics after, and the Super Adaptoid story was the one that really got me, because all the way Captain America had so much action in that. And,
yeah. It was only half an issue.
Yeah.
And then and it was a 2-part story split up. My mother bought that one for me at Stars and Stripes in Ramstein, Germany, and I'm telling you that.
Hang on a second, Mark.
Sure.
My cat wants to go out. This is embarrassing.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. I like the fact you've got the big Kirby book out.
Yeah.
But hey, Ted.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, thanks.
Dude,
No,
we're on
we're
on a panel. This ain't a phone call.
I was trying to put this quote that I read last night. I should have wrote down. I think it was David Lloyd was talking about the simplicity of Kirby and how there's the energy is the amazing thing about it. It's not, there was a really good quote I was trying to find. That's why I was a little distracted.
No, that's okay.
Oh, that's good.
So
sorry, Mark.
I'm just agreeing. The Super Adaptoid, I don't know if that came out before the couple of FFs that I got, but that story actually kind of scared me. The Adaptoid grabbing Captain America over his head. And my parents up until that time had been buying me like Tweety and Sylvester comics and the Flintstones and stuff. But to see this intense action with this Adaptoid, Captain America getting ready to hurl him off this bridge or something, and I was like, it was, and so was Claw, Murderous Master of Sound. Even though they were
the Claw,
just
big red elephant and the gorilla.
Dude, I see that, and I saw Darth Maul, and I said, there's Claw right there with the stylized thing on his face. But so go ahead. I'm sorry. I keep on cutting people off. I apologize.
Oh no, that's all right. I don't
get enthusiastic.
Yeah, it's just as far as the monster stuff.
They were going back. You said something about the short, how they were all 10 pagers, 14 pagers. I made some notes last night. I have this. They put out 2 volume omnibuses, and they isolated all the Kirby short stories in these 2 volumes. And I don't have the second volume, but I wrote down all the names that were just hilarious. We can always run through those. But
here they are.
The volume 2 I don't have yet.
Essential reading. Essential.
They've done that with Ditko too. So it's,
that's important too. Groot.
Colossus. One of the first Colossus story was full length. I took up the entire book. I forget which journey. And they actually at the end say, "Hey, would you like to see more full length stories? Let us know." They were asking readers to write in. But most of them were all short stories. What I was also amazed at was how there was already a little bit, of the germ of the Marvel universe. Right on the edge here, you had there was repeat. Several of the monsters came back, or even one was a son came back. Goom, I think, wasn't a.
Was it?
There was Goom and there was Googam, which is like a name that I kind of went like, you kind of push it.
Yeah, Googam was the son of Goom.
Yeah.
Googam.
And they just sat around the office thinking this stuff up.
And there was a Dr. Droom character amongst these characters that was an interesting kind of a dry run for Doctor Strange, and then also you got the Doctor Doom name out of it. Then he comes back as Dr. Druid in the continuity, and then amazing. But I'm curious, what do you think that these stories were these fully scripted, or you just let Jack go wild? Because he was basically down at this point. It was just basically Stan, a very basic crew, and he was and there's only 8 titles a month, or 16 bi-monthlies, because they had to go through DC distribution. So I'm curious that you look at the titles of the monsters. You think Jack came up with those? Stan came up with those? Combination of the two? That
I don't know.
Well, Stan's such a wordsmith. I thought maybe the weird tied names sound like something Stan would come up with.
I can hear him yelling them. Like
Go get him.
And we'll call him Fin Fang Foom. Yeah. I can see that with Stan. That would be a guess though. So
Also, I mentioned the Twilight Zone. I think another big influence, what was going on in 1961, Gorgo comes out.
right.
In 1954, of course, we go back to 54, Godzilla had first came out. The Blob, big hit in 1958.
Yeah.
And then was 1954, and then the Harryhausen movies were playing. And the funny thing was also, I think Evan Deere pointed this out in one of an intro I read, the usage of the really good monsters could not be used by Comics Code, Comics with the Code. Dell and whoever else was not using the code, they could use a Frankenstein or a Wolfman or Dracula.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
None of the Marvel, DC, nobody who's going by the code could not use the monsters. And
Ridiculous.
These were Comics Code approved monsters. These somehow these giant weird, and then that's what they seem a lot of fun and harmless in a way because the teeth are taken out. And of course, at the theaters, the Hammer films are coming out. Late night television has the classic monster movies. So there was all this monster stuff in the air, the Aurora models, and all this stuff was happening. And yet, the Comics Code was still strangling on the hardcore stuff. And so that was a one-way Stan and Jack and Steve and all those circumvented it. That's the only way they could do it, was doing these kind of monsters.
Well, it kind of reminds me of just anything like a tarantula or the deadly mantis or whatever, a giant monster, giant robot, it's all kind of like, I mean, I'm glad in a way. Maybe that was a good thing that there was a little bit of they were shackled a little bit and couldn't do it, because we got these great comics. I find them, I mean, when you got a book, this darn thick of it, you don't have a tendency to read it all in one sitting, because you're kind of like, okay, here comes the next thing. But still, it's a joy to read 5 or 6 of the stories real quick and look at that beautiful artwork. And I think that maybe it's okay that they had a more of a Disney level type of monster movie story, G-rated. It's funny though, if you think about it in real life, if these monsters actually existed, they do a hell of a lot more damage than Frankenstein or Dracula or something. I mean, they just knock over a building. People would die. I mean, there isn't this sort of like, we got to get out of here with the Jack Kirby characters doing this, running for it or that kind of thing. I mean, that people would get killed, a lot of them. And so it's always of the belief that, wow, boy, we nearly escaped, destruction. So.
Well, I go back to the energy level is is the most appealing thing in this stuff. You just go page by page, thumbing through this omnibus, and it just leads your eye, and the energy just crackles off of the page so easily. And the fact that Jack would just do this, start at the one corner of the page and draw it out, no storyboards, no thumbnails, just do it.
I think that's two things with Jack. I think one, that's that animation training, and two, he just was. It's sort of like sometimes like what I've heard Bernie Wrightson had said, is that he almost used his brain in his hand like an opaque projector, projecting on the page. Like he saw it exactly before he started drawing. I think Kirby kind of had that ability to design the whole thing right then and there in his skull, and just it's almost like a copy machine, just printing it out.
I mean, didn't he used to work from one side of the page to the other and just
top left corner down to the bottom right? That's almost the way of speed reading. Here's my look at it and weep, pal. My Krang original artwork.
Beauty.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's up.
Oh yeah, it's it's no pun intended. It's a monster.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's in the Jack Kirby documentary, which I really recommend seeing. It's on the re-release of the Fantastic Four movie DVD special edition, and I think it's Lynn Wein or Marv Wolfman. They would go over there to his house as kids, and you get to sit in there, and Roz would make them sandwiches. Jack's wife.
It's so cool.
And he just said that he would just, like you said, Matt, he would go up in the left-hand corner and just start drawing.
Yeah,
just down till it was finished. and that was done. And they turned the page over. And he's just doing that constantly. Can
Yeah.
you imagine, people, there were some complaints like, oh, you didn't draw this boot in the right way, or you left off this shoelace and this. So, but I mean, he's drawing these monthly books or all these short stories just constantly,
Mhm.
and the level of craftsmanship and beauty is just amazing at the speed he was doing it at.
Yeah.
I think that, as we know, that the industry was struggling really hard back when Monster Comics were in production, originally. And I don't think without the Monster Comics and eventually evolving into future, Strange Tales evolving into a regular Marvel superhero book with the same title,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that. But I think it helped keep the industry going. And because Kirby, I don't know, I wouldn't say single-handedly, but I think the monsters, the quality was always good. And
Which is
I heard that about the 1960s, or some people say the comics might not have survived the 1960s if it hadn't been for Jack Kirby's production level.
yeah.
I mean,
that even goes as far as the 70s. But going back to the late 50s, it was funny because he was at DC doing Challengers and Green Arrow,
Mhm.
and DC didn't really like National, as they were calling it at that time, or I don't know when they switched to DC, but Kirby was not a good fit for them because they wanted a house style. Everything was, kind of tampered down and all looked, this homogenized look DC wanted.
processed.
And Jack was not, Jack was his own, unique being art-wise. And of course, he got in trouble with Jack Schiff, the editor there, over the straight the Spy Master. So that's what had him scrambling to Marvel. He left. He couldn't work at DC. And of course, at that time, DC was the big kahuna of the books. That's where you wanted to work if you were going to work in comic books. Joe Simon his partner had gotten out and went on to the ad agency. So here's, Jack having to go back to the little Stanley Lieber, and and to work for this stuff. But what DC couldn't understand is like, what is the appeal of Jack? They thought their books were the really nice looking ones. They couldn't understand why these things were selling.
Yeah.
To them, it looked crude and didn't have the sheen that they thought a comic book should have.
It's strange. I mean, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
Oh, I think one reason they may have, their stuff was kind of stilted for a long time, the DC House
Right.
style, but Buck Kirby is, it's just sheer energy.
Right. And then for example, with Green Arrow, they put him on Green Arrow and he decides to shift it a little bit to a science fiction element, get it away from the Batman clone.
Mhm.
And Weisinger, the editor, didn't really care for it. He didn't care. He didn't like what Jack was doing with it. But as the kids, it went straight to us as kids, and we understood it. Like, oh yeah, this works better.
And it's like he did with Jimmy Olsen. That.
Oh my God.
And then look at Kirby going. It just blew your mind, man. It just burst on the scene.
Well, I thought the world was going to end when he left Marvel. I thought I go, how could the FF go on and Cap? And I thought, oh, this is devastating. But I was super excited to see what he was going to do at DC and the ads saying he's coming. Yeah.
Kirby
really building it up, and I totally missed that he started on Jimmy Olsen. They kind of snuck that in the back door of the Jimmy Olsen title. Yeah. I bought all the number ones of Forever People, New Gods, and Mr. Miracle, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, he's over here doing Jimmy Olsen. I had to go to Kids and try to scramble for those first couple of months of Jimmy Olsen. Mm-hmm. And I had a kid, a friend of mine, he was collecting Jimmy Olsen at the time. Jimmy Olsen was way off my radar.
Yeah,
but he was collecting.
You and a lot of other people.
He gave him whiplash when from one month to the next month, all of a sudden Kirby comes on it. It was just like this is night and day. Shit.
Yes, very different. That's what Kirby asked for. I mean, he asked for that book. They said, okay, you're over here now, DC. What do you want to do? And he goes, give me your lowest selling book. And it was Jimmy Olsen. That was on the bottom.
I heard, I've heard several stories on that, and that's one of them I heard. And then another one I was thinking they wanted him to be on one of their mainstream books and do his own creation stuff too. And yeah, that was. Then he said, "Well, what's the lowest selling one?" Because he didn't want to kick anybody off of.
He was, oh, he was a good man. He was, he was a good, he had good morals, and he was a kind person. I mean, you know, so he, yeah, I mean, he came along and started with Jimmy Olsen, and we've got this wild transition, insane. It's like, it might not even, it could have just called it, you know, Kid Kronos or something. I mean, it didn't even have to be Jimmy Olsen. I mean, now Jimmy Olsen was cool.
Yeah, and he had monsters in there, and
He was a bad boy, and he had the Newsboy Legion being in there, and everything, and some of those stories, it's still such, even to this day, I still think of it and get, like you said, Ted, like a whiplash effect. It's so different that when Kirby takes over, I still go, this is not even from the same universe. You might as well just separate it out. The Kurt Swan sort of Superman, or the Wayne Boring sort of Superman.
Right.
And now you've got this completely different thing.
Which I love both of those guys.
I do too. Oh yeah. I mean, that's the thing about the DC. You were talking earlier about the DC style and the fact that it was tamped down and stuff. But my problem, I love so much of DC, Joe Kubert and all those guys, and there was such great artwork. But when you open them up, sometimes it was a little difficult to tell the difference between, as a kid, the style between one artist as another. When you yeah, when you get older, you can separate them out by little details. But I think DC was really honing a lot of those guys. There were, like I said, Kubert was easy to see the difference by his pen and ink style, and that he literally looked like his comics were drawn, not crafted, if you know what I'm saying.
Like chiseled.
Yeah, and you get to, but you get to Kirby, and it's like the guy's his own comic book company. That's all he is. He should have just said, I'm just starting Jack Kirby Comics. Is what
you mentioned that there was monsters in Jimmy Olsen. I was actually, now that I think about it, Jimmy Olsen was such a really kind of a compendium of, he put the classic the monsters in that 1-2-part story. He put the big Loch Ness monster and stuff like in there.
Well, I love those yellow monsters with 4 arms.
Right.
Remember the big boom where Superman's literally flying a nuclear reactor on one arm, and just throws it down this shaft, and all these monsters just go dogpiling in down on top of it, trying to get to the radiation. I'm like, yep, that's cool. What can you say?
It's almost an overview of Kirby's career up to that point, because he also threw brought back the Newsboy Legion, and so you get to go. You had the Golden Age characters. You got the monsters in there. You got Superman in there. So it's almost like a grab bag of all of Kirby's wonderful.
The Guardian was in there too. That was fun. I thought that was a neat looking Superman.
Whereas over here, the 3 other titles, the other Fourth World titles, they were this somewhat constructed. Still Mark Evanier and Sherman, the 2 guys that hung out with him. They always say Jack would go, well, this is what I'm going to do next month. And by the time next month went around, it would be a whole different story. He had already forgotten what he was going to, or he had planned. So the whole pact with the Highfather and Jack and Darkseid and all that stuff was amazing. Another mind blower. Well, we should go, since we're at Monsterama. He gets to a point where the code lightens up. Frankenstein and Wolfman, all this can come back, and so Marvel starts letting, and that's when they did the reprints, and they also did new stuff like Werewolf by Night and the Mike Plouffe.
Monster of Frankenstein. Oh, wonderful stuff. Yeah.
But so and Carmen, Infantino says the New Gods and New Gods for people not selling well. We're going to cancel them, and so we want some new stuff. The Planet of the Apes had done well on television on a network showing, so they said, give us a Planet of the Apes comic book, which was of course a Commandy.
Yeah,
but,
my favorite.
We want a monster, and so Jack goes, oh, they want a monster? Well, I'll give them a monster. I'll give them the demon.
Yeah.
Just in your face. Okay, no bones about it. Demon, and
it was brutal too. I was a little surprised reading that as a kid. Like, the monster is coming, attacks the demon, and the demon is like, no way, pal, and just destroys this thing. They do it kind of in silhouette, but I'm like, wow, in this thing, well, I wouldn't call the demon necessarily the good guy, but he's the closest thing to a good guy, and the kills. I mean, he just out and out.
He
it's
laughs
just straight,
when he does it. He's like, ha 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 ha.
Yeah, it's like straight out homicide, but it was good. It was a damn fun comic, and lots of monsters
Yeah,
every time.
it's not as mean as Jack can get, because Jack is, he's not mean.
No.
Well, I
It's-
think they were saying at the time that he loved a lot of stuff like the Charles Bronson movies and the Clint Eastwood movies and stuff like that. So maybe there was a little bit of that. That had been around for a little while.
right.
So by the time Demon came out, it could have been that effect, that R-rated movie effect of the good guy in this movie does take out people without the normal channels of the law. And in his comic book, well, we got monsters, so who's going to care? I mean, it ain't like he's running into a nursery killing babies or something. I mean, it's other monsters, but it's pretty intense.
Yeah, it was, again, the intensity and the energy is amazing, even though, he's a World War II veteran and he saw a lot of horrifying things.
Sure.
So it's amazing that seems to be, he never wants to go that dark and deep, even though it's in him, he's seen it and experienced it.
Sure.
The very positive, even those monsters, the monsters of the late 50s and early 60s, there's just kind of a fun level to them. There's just,
they're
they
goofy.
don't, like you said, Mark, if we saw them in real life, we would be running for our lives. But in the way Jack presented them, they were just, it was just so fun.
My son, I showed him some of those comics, and there's a Wuxtree's comic shop over in Athens. I think it's connected to the record store where some of the guys from REM worked at the time, but above it is this comic shop, also called Wuxtree's. They're both, and he'll go in there and he'll plunk down, money for Jack Kirby monster comics. He loves that stuff. And he's loved it ever since he was 6, 7 years old, the same way I did. I was looking at him in the 70s. He's looking at him in the 2010s, between 2010 2020. And Ted, you said, did you ever actually get your hands, because we're talking reprints here. I mean, we all have to admit it. We weren't there to see the original ones, which seem to have just disappeared off the face of the earth. I find it to be so rare to walk in and look at somebody's old comic collection. They can have some old DCs from the 50s and stuff, but I very rarely see Strange Tales pre-superhero stuff sitting around. It's kind of rare.
No, it is. You're right. And then even some of the titles, I didn't even realize there Tales of Wonder. There's a couple of titles that totally have been forgotten about. Oh, there you go. There's one. There's an original.
What's the monster on there? Hold on, let me click on
Brutu.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, it's one of my
10 cents.
Look, it was all new world to me when they showed up in the Fantasy Masterpieces.
Yeah.
And then when the flood happened in the 70s with where monsters dwell and everything, I was like, wow.
That was around 68, I thought. I bought.
Yeah, when the expansion happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It's 68, 69, because that's when I got that copy with Titano Tower of Shadows, which I think also had a Steranko story in it too. Ted. But yeah, I mean, I'm grateful for reprints. I mean, that was the way I got to read most of the Fantastic Four in the early 70s. Was Marvel's Greatest Comics. Was reprinting the stuff that I couldn't consistently get, so I was buying all of it. So here I am buying the Monster Comics, buying the FF reprints, buying whatever else, then buying the Demon and Commandy, and before, New Gods Forever. I mean, it's like Kirby, you were just like, okay, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that. And it's like, that was that it was like gravitational pull. When there was a Kirby comic on the rack, you just went right for it.
I looked specifically for Kirby comics on the rack. It's like when 2001 Treasury Edition came out, I was
yeah.
I went, no way.
Yeah, I walked into a store in Cumberland, Maryland. I walked in and I went, it's Kirby and it's 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, I'm in heaven.
Yeah, I've got it upstairs. I've still got it in the bag that I purchased it. I'm not even gonna. Yeah, it's just fantastic. And yet, you're right. I will tell you this too. If I walked in and there was some other comic, I remember even getting like the larger size comics. They were giant size, and there was a couple other king size specials and all that. But I'd even walk in, and if there was some other regular sort of comics, and then there was even a Jack Kirby Western,
Mm.
like Kid Colt Outlaw or Rawhide Kid or whatever, I'd pick that up first. I love those too. And I'm not, and at that time I wasn't much of a Western fan. I am now, but at the time I wasn't. But Kirby doing Westerns was good too.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, let's since we're all around the same age, were you two like me and a lot of others when Kirby came back to Marvel? We kind of gritted our teeth a little bit, kind of like, oh, I don't know. And he totally, when they put him on Captain America, he totally ignored the continuity of what had happened prior to that. His artwork, he's getting a little bit older now. His artwork is getting a little bit more, blockier and chunkier. And
Yeah.
I think I bought number 1 of Eternals. I would buy the number 1s and Black Panther, and then I dropped them.
I got Machine Man and some others and Devil Dinosaur. I'll tell you this. I think there was, for me personally, because of my age, there were 2 things going on. We all went through this. You paid attention to comics, you paid attention to Saturday morning cartoons, you paid attention to movies, and then you got old enough and then you started paying attention to the opposite sex.
Yeah.
And then you started, worrying about dating and going out and am I going to get a job? And I want my first car. And you and I've heard this a million times over. There's that space there where you do that. And then finally you establish your private life. And then you're like, okay, now that I've done all that, what am I going to do? Hey, I found an old comic in the comic shop, and boom, it reignites. Because I mean, you know what I'm talking about?
So you basically weren't around for that era.
No, I was there right when that started. I got that issue of Captain America. As a matter of fact, in high school, I was in the 9th grade when that came out. It was
the Mad Bomb.
No, the Mad Bomb, but the cover.
The Bicentennial, the Treasury.
Well, no. So I'm not talking about a comic book. I'm talking about my you know how you had a notebook that you took to school. That was the sealed in plastic cover that I had on my school notebook was that cover,
right.
which was a great cover
too. It was just.
But I just started to go, I think I was getting told, and I kind of became a little disillusioned with comics in general until like that explosion in the mid 80s.
Well, I guess I'm more of a geek than you were, Mark, because I stayed with the comic books even though I did the dating and all that rigmarole too. But I have to admit, I hate to admit it, that I was kind of like, oh, I'm disenchanted with this. And Devil Dinosaur and the Eternal, all this stuff. I was like, yeah. But now, my point was I wanted to get to is that now I'm finding that stuff as just as intriguing and exciting and interesting than the early any period of Kirby.
I want to get a run of the Eternals to read.
Yeah,
I mean, I wanted that even before I heard there was a movie.
Well, you're in luck because of the movie. They got about 3 or 4 different reprint editions coming out, omnibuses and hardbacks, oversized hardbacks of it because of the film coming out. So
I love the Eternals. The first issue, I bought it and just opened up that 2-page spread in the tomb, and I'm going, man, this is good.
Yeah.
I like the first few issues of that series quite a lot.
But I kind of ignored it, and then went on my merry way. And then because I was over here doing whatever was hot at Marvel. I was buying Undergrounds, or I was buying the Fantagraphic stuff. I was staying up with a lot of the alternative stuff. American Splendor was coming out. All the changes in the market and everything.
Yeah,
and,
I think one of the things for me is that when we were talking about the transition that I went through too, I wasn't stopping being an artist or anything like that. As a matter of fact, I got in high school, I was like one of the art guys in school, and then immediately went to the little Votech art class here with a really great art teacher for about 2 years. So, I mean, I was still in art, but I had moved over more into a fine art venue. But it was always there. It was like the sleeper has awakened. Yeah. When all of a sudden I was able to actually attempt to draw like my first comic story or ink it, or then to do monster artwork, I was just like, boom. It was like I had been, had been buried underground and broke out like Maddox Zola, he takes over the world. Yeah. And I went nuts for it. Again, it was just, I don't know. Sometimes I think life kind of runs you over when you're trying to have a good time with your comics and monster movies and stuff,
what was amazing is that then, so that kind of, then all of a sudden he kind of disappeared and went into animation. And I was working at a comic book store at the time, and the direct sale market was really hitting big. And Pacific Comics figured out, okay, we're going to play Marvel and DC at their game and put out comic books the same format and the look. And they got Jack to do Captain Victory.
Mm-hmm.
And it was exciting. It was a big deal. And I remember I bought that thing religiously. I don't know if I read them all, but it was Jack. He was back, and the respect, the love, and the energy still was there. Even though he had even progressed even further into his look, his character, almost caricature of what he was. And he was, he didn't, he had inkers that inked toward his pencils as opposed to Joe
It
Sinnott
was
or
too
something.
much. It was, I mean, Kirby always, if you ever looked at his pencils, even back in the 50s and 60s, if you looked at them a lot of times, they didn't change as much as people think. But when you got to those later inkers that revered him so much, it was almost like, I don't want to change one thing that Jack drew.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a mistake. I mean, you look at Joe Sinnott inking him during the middle of that FF run, and it's a sheer joy. I mean, it's an absolute joy. And there's other guys, Chick Stone.
I
and
love Chick Stones.
Yeah, Matt, being in the industry, Matt, did you Mark and I have talked in length about this. Do you like the later day inkers that stayed faithful to his pencils, or do you like the other the early, like Sinnott and Sid Shores?
The cleanup guys.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
My take, because everybody has a different inking style, of course. But Joe's stuff was really slick, and I think he was great on Kirby because Joe would go in and make minor changes to the faces and stuff, like put the eyes on level and things like that.
Might be nice.
But as far as best inkers go, I really like Chick Stone. I really like Mike Royer, and personally, he's a great storyteller.
Oh gosh, yes.
But he followed very closely to what Jack had in pencils.
Was that him that told the story one time about he changed the face on Big Barda, and it was the one time he saw Kirby get angry?
Yeah, I think. But didn't Vinnie Coletta do that?
I don't know. Maybe it was Vince Coletta. Maybe it was.
Vinnie did that.
Yeah, and it was like, yeah. I mean, it's like Kirby's women, whatever you call them. I mean, in the Jack Kirby universe filter, those are attractive women, and I look at them as being attractive women in an abstract way. They fit in that universe. But I saw the change that was made to the face of Big Barda, and it was terrible. I mean, it was like a Cupid doll face was glued onto her, and I'm trying to think of some of the other really great.
Well, what do you think about Dick Ayers? I mean,
I love Dick Ayers is.
Well, the majority of these monster stories are Dick Ayers.
They're perfect. He was perfect for those. I mean, it would have been almost weird to see Joe Sinnott is something about it. I just think of the 1960s. I think of Sinnott's inking. I think of the 1950s and early 60s. I think of Dick Ayers. And I think Ayers was very, very good. A lot of times you look at the polls, there's this polls of who's the best inker, and there's like, 30 guys for Jack Kirby, and Sinnott's usually at the top. And Dick Ayers is in those top 5. Chick Stone's up there. There's a couple other guys. There's one guy that catches hell from some people, and I think it's totally wrong. He did Captain America for a while, but he did a kind of a neat feathering, like he would actually kind of sculpt the face a little bit with micro lines and stuff.
Kind of like Barry Windsor.
Might have been Sid Shores. No, that was later. This is in the mid '60s, but there was one where Captain America fights the Trapster, and on the cover,
Sid Shores. I'm pretty sure that's Sid Shores.
I think Sid Shores is a damn good ink. As a matter of fact, he's trying to almost move it up to a pen and ink sort of a style.
Which is interesting because he was one of the replacements for Kirby, Joe, and Jack on Captain America in the 40s. He was one of the artists.
Well, his inking might be different from others, but I still think it was very good.
It's interesting going to the omnibus. Wally Wood sneaks in for a story.
Yeah.
So we've seen Wally do the challengers on him. But also, I think I love the Ditko inking on Jack. That's
Oh,
always a
Toad
really
Man?
absolutely. Yeah. It was
fascinating combo.
like just like, there was a transporter accident and Ditko got merged with Kirby, and now we've got this other super cool artist that came out of it. Yeah. Kirby's dynamics and Ditko's just rendering or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The one I remember going into the bookstore with my mom. My aunt and uncle were there. My dad was in Vietnam at the time, and we walked in the bookstore, and there was one of those issues of Fear, which was the line that
25 cents.
me and my brother were trying to buy those, and I walked in, and it was with a double Z at the beginning, Zootak, the thing that shouldn't exist, or the monster that shouldn't. The guy's got the magic paint, and he paints it, and
Oh
Zootak
yeah.
comes off the giant canvas, and then he paints another monster to fight that monster and all that. But wait, not so science fiction-y. We're talking what, metaphysical or whatever you want to
Yeah,
call it.
magic.
But still such a cool looking monster, and a nice splash page at the beginning and all that. And I remember being there, and I didn't have a quarter, and we were leaving. My uncle's like, come on, we got to go, we got to get in the car. And I had to leave it. I didn't get a copy of that until like years later. I finally got a copy of that book, but boy, did I love that. Absolutely
Well,
loved it.
often go on eBay and look for nothing but Kirby books.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I have a
Yeah.
little section up there, and
The other one that I loved was I even remember where I bought all of these, or when they were bought for me or whatever. The one was that real white-haired with little bits of metal on him. That they called him the Titan when they reprinted him, but he was originally called the Hulk.
oh
And
yeah,
he was white with that like metal midsection.
waistband or something, right?
Yeah, and it was such a cool looking monster. I'm like, boy, I wish somebody would do like they do with the Incredibles or something, and do some of these as in and have 3D animators do these as stories, to build the Jack Kirby looking heroes and all that kind of, and then do these monsters. And I'd love to see that, or in real life. But what are the chances?
Well, that's interesting you said that, because I think at one point in this book, Peter Pulaski, Poplaski,
Probably Pulaski.
yeah, he designed. They were going to design all these monsters for a toy line.
Oh, really?
And he had this whole. He drew them all out, and then you'd have little action figures of people going or
Right.
there was a toy set when I was a kid with of monsters with army men. I remember that, but that would have just been perfect for the Kirby line. The what we ought to say also is how I love how a lot of the names, like you said, the Hulk, it got reused. Stan just recycled so many of the names. He had a Diablo, drew particular R out of it. You had there was also
Well, like you said, Dr. Doom was
Hulk,
one of them.
Electro. There's a character called Electro. They were all just over and over again. The but it was interesting too that now they've taken a lot of these characters and they've actually created giant. They're part of the Marvel universe now in the continuity, and they're actually done big story arcs using all the monsters and a lot of them. There's even a Hulk annual where Hulk fights a whole bunch of them, and Kirby actually did the cover for it.
Oh, okay, right. I think I remember that one.
So.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at these things, I mean, look at all the amount of ideas that are being shoveled across in the monster era, and then you just run out of stuff. Yep, well, I am Groot.
Groot, yeah.
Groot.
Yeah.
No.
I wish in
character, and now he's been one of the most beloved characters in the MCU.
Yeah,
go figure. I'd love for them to at least somewhere in Guardians of the Galaxy 3 or 4 or 5 or something, just do a little flashback to when Groot was just a monster attacking. So that would be so funny.
Yeah.
People would just love it and go, well, there's that branch that broke off of Groot and formed into a giant monster and attacked New York or something like that. But I mean, all the stuff that they shoveled through those stories, and like you said, Ted, they're like Twilight Zones. It gets tough with things like Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and all these television shows, Roald Dahl type of stuff, and O. Henry, where you fool the audience. I mean, I'm amazed when I think of the ending of Planet of the Apes, that they really fooled the audience as well as they did with 7 years of Twilight Zone just before this came out, but
Yeah.
they did. And I think it gets kind of tough, and you end up finally just going, okay, I got to, I've got a deadline here. I've got to grab a chunk of this and attach it to this and then send it on its merry way. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Yeah, and getting back to when you asked what are your favorite monsters, if I have to probably pick one from the late 50s, early 60s, I like Sprag.
Sprag.
SSR. Looked like a giant egg sitting there on the ground.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's just
My father in the Air Force, he answered to a guy named Colonel Spragg. That was his colonel. And the first time I ever heard that, and he goes, yeah, I said, where you going, Dad? He goes, I got to get back over to the base. I got a call from Colonel Spragg. And I just busted out laughing. My dad looked at me like I was an idiot or something. I'm like, Colonel Spragg. I imagine my father standing in front of this mountain, that had a face on it talking to him.
Wow.
Well, there was even a monster called Thor with 2 R's.
Yeah,
It's-
I remember.
it's so
Kind
funny.
of shaggy looking.
And
Yeah.
it looks like I love it when they run out of names sometimes. Like there was one just called Brute, or Gruto.
Bruto, yeah. I was
There's
just
some
looking
good
at
ones.
Bruto.
Yeah. Gratu.
Gratu, okay.
That was the first issue of Where Monsters Dwell I ever got.
How
Was
about
the
Gigantus?
Gratu,
What
which was
about
weird. I got that issue of Gratu the same year I saw The Naked Jungle with Charlton Heston with the fire ants. Anybody,
yeah.
or the soldier ants? Remember that? And so it was like a weird double whammy of ant attack.
And we would be remiss to say that the monsters still, sporadically showed up in the Silver Age once the Marvel Universe kicked in. Giant monsters or weird creatures, or that giant baby alien in FF issue earlier, that green thing.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Terrible.
Well, think about this too. Let's talk about probably other than Groot, luckily being in movies to make him as famous. Let's pretend that didn't exist. By its own sheer creativity, I would say that the most famous monster of all of those is Fin Fang Foom.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was just beyond the wildest of the monsters. The design was wild. The neat story behind communist lines and in China. I don't think they said China, but that's what I mean. It's got the Great Wall. The monster rips up the Great Wall and starts using it like a bullwhip to beat an army with.
Yeah, that's right.
And everything, but but he did have little purple pants on.
Yeah, I was just saying we ought to bring
naked monster.
Yeah, you ought to make a lot of them had little shorts. A lot of them, if you look at them, even if they didn't color them, they were there. The outlines over there. That's why I love the early Hulk, the first 6 issues of Hulk.
Yeah.
Avengers 1 and 2, where I like the little short pants Hulk.
They would change with him. You could believe that they were made out of some material that would expand and contract. But
the raggedy ones,
purple jeans would sort of like, after 1 or 2 changes, that's it, man. They're gone. And how come it never splits in the back? But Fin Fang Foom was, I think that was a 3-parter, wasn't it? Wasn't that a full issue? Just about
close to one, but not. I don't think it was
complete, but a big story. And it's this guy who doesn't agree with his father being a heavy-duty communist, that kind of stuff. And
13 pages. It was a 13-pager.
Oh, okay. So it was a mid-size, yeah. And I can't remember exactly, but the dad and the son are not happy with each other. The son seems to be sort of a kind of in the father's eyes, kind of a bum or something, if I remember. But the kid doesn't agree with the dad's ideology or the country's ideology too. And somewhere in the middle of it, not exactly sure how it happens, but this monster gets woken up and starts attacking the army. And the guy, once again, this goes back to metaphysical, not science, but at the end, the guy has to use this like special feather to sort of get Fin Fang Foom to crawl back down in his cave and go back to sleep. That one to me is probably the most beautifully drawn of all of the Kirby monsters, and it was so popular. Later, you saw him cropping up in Walt Simonson's Thor stuff.
Well, I love that Iron Man story. I think it was Leighton was working on it, and they brought the what's his name? I can't. Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank. The Iron Man foe with the rings. Oriental.
Mandarin.
Mandarin utilizes Fin Fang Foom to his purposes. Nefarious purposes. It was wonderful. It was like, oh my gosh, that is so cool. And so that was like, I think that might have been the first really overt use of bringing these monsters into the retroactively coming into the continuity of the Marvel universe, or at least the biggest splash at the time that they've now utilized more and more now.
They need to do that, more of it. I mean, they need to do something like a line of comics where the monsters are in there, but then you bring in superheroes as guest stars.
Well, I think there was,
something.
like I said, there was a story arc that was pretty big. They actually reprinted an oversized book. I'll have to do some research on that and let you know about it. But
Please, I mean, I don't have my finger on the pulse of comics the way I used to. Like I said, for me, it's cyclical. 60s way up, 70s kind of dipped down, but then came back up in the early 70s and dipped down, came back in the 80s. It's just sort of like that with me. I'm always sort of listening, but to me, the time period of Kirby between like the late 50s and up until he quit Marvel, to me is probably my single favorite chunk of comic history. I just love it more than anything else. They altered what had become standard for too long. We still had Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman were the last surviving superheroes. Then they brought back the Silver Age, but then Marvel came in with this, for lack of a better term, I mean, a kind of a humanity to their characters. Like Johnny Storm was worried about some girl that he liked. She doesn't like me as much as I like her, or the arguments between the Thing and Johnny Storm, or so-and-so goes to college or whatever. And there was a lot of like, boy, these really are people. I even did it like on the back of the Lancer books. It says superheroes with personal problems was kind of the attitude with it. And I think that was the real kind of the thing that broke off for me from DC quite significantly, was that I could relate to the characters as human beings at that time.
And how much work was Jack doing back then to get Marvel established? I mean, it was him and Speed, basically.
Yeah, basically a little bit Don Heck, a little bit Paul Ryman, but they done all the inventory because he was sitting on a lot of inventory when the implosion happened, and then once Jack got kicked out of DC, Stan knew what he had with Jack and just go for it, and kept that company afloat till the FF1 came on and kicked it into high gear.
Yeah, but then Jack was also doing Thor, or Journey into Mystery, or
Hulk. I mean, you look at all the covers he was doing, and then
just covers. Yeah, I mean,
I love it.
And then he would take Jack and go, okay, here's X-Men or here's Daredevil or whatever. He would jumpstart. He would actually lay out stories, for the artist, John Romita,
Don Heck.
I remember the Hulk issues that I looked at and goes, this is Kirby, but then it has another artist's name, and you look, and the shape, the action, the energy is Kirby, but it just doesn't look like Kirby renderings as it was. And then you found out that Kirby would just whip out these super layouts real quick and hand it to the guy and go, okay, just sort of go with that layout. Mike Wieringo, who passed, a long time ago, I didn't really know the guy's work that well, but I just listened to this is years ago, probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And Mike Wieringo said, layout is hard. Layout is hard. And I was like, oh, is it just, I had done a little bit of the comic work, just a little bit. And I was like, man, layout of comic is hard. That's probably why I ended up becoming just an illustrator. One image, I got to worry about one layout. But you look at what Kirby did dynamically on a page, and the fact that we're talking about him starting up in one corner and going across.
Yeah.
You're just like, he's a savant. He's Mozart, what Mozart is to music.
And Stan was so adamant about him and his look and what Jack was bringing to it. He had layouts. He laid out for John Severin on the Nick Fury Shield. He laid out for John Buscema for an issue of Shield. He laid out for Stranko. Of course, Jim was an unproven talent at that point.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. I think even that X-Men that Alex Toth did was a Jack Kirby layout, I think.
Huh.
And that's why it looks so weird, because Alex Toth and Jack Kirby, I don't think mix too well together.
Interesting. I've never seen it. I'm going to have to take a look.
It's early X-Men, and Alex didn't stay long.
do me a favor and give me the when you get a chance, give me the issue or issues numbers.
Sure.
I definitely want to see that. But yeah, I mean, well, I do believe it's 10:58. Is that correct? Are we
Yeah.
coming to the end of our panel? Any last thoughts, Matt?
Only that I can honestly say that Kirby is my absolute favorite comic artist. Always
Yeah.
has been.
He's the
Oh,
king. He's King Kirby. Long live the king. I mean, he encompasses entire comic book history and everything. I mean, I always talk about with my music. I think all things lead to Bob Dylan. I think all things lead to Jack Kirby and comic books almost. I don't know what cannot be connected to Jack in some way or another.
Cool. Well, like I said earlier, I wouldn't be an artist, I don't think, if it weren't for Jack Kirby. Like
Yeah.
you said, Matt, you look at the hands, you could see how they were drawn, but it was a segue to understanding not only his art but other art beyond it, and so I'm incredibly grateful, indebted to Jack Kirby. He is the king. He is the greatest comic book artist in my opinion.
Right.
And I'm grateful, and I'm really happy to be able to have talked with both of you guys today, my buddies.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that the next time we're doing this, it's face to face, hopefully next year around this time. And it was great talking to two people of like mind. So thank you so much.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you for
having me.
inviting me. So,
All right, and we'll see what's going on. I mean, hopefully, now the motion picture fund. Please, people, if you get a chance, donate to it. It's for a good cause, and we appreciate it. So, all right, we are going to say goodbye. I believe I'm hitting the leave button anyway.
Okay.
Watch this here.
So you all take care. All right.
Okay. Take
Adios.
care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.